Hello, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hola.
Hello, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Not bad. How's everyone else?
We're still in a Zoom meeting?
There. Marlene's coming in. All right, let's get a gallery view up.
Oh, good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
Everyone's having a nice, relaxed, rainy
Oh.
Vancouver morning.
Yeah.
Are you still out in Chilliwack, Marlene?
Yes, I am, and went for a really muddy bike ride yesterday. I loved it, covered in mud.
Well, today's the day for the shower, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, tracked it everywhere.
Fair enough, fair enough.
How's everybody doing, Gail and Derek? Nice to see you guys.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marlene.
Yeah.
Good. And Charmaine, hello, lovely red top.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? I love the color of your top. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Have to be a little bright when it's gray outside, right?
Makes sense.
Give me an excuse to get out of my PJs, I guess. So.
Oh, I know. Yeah, exactly. And Jackie Weiler, hello. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Not bad, thanks.
Good.
There's construction around me, so I know I will be muted, but I'll apologize if you do hear anything.
No worries.
No worries. And
Good, Jack.
Hardy.
It means someone's working, huh?
Yeah.
There's lots of construction around here, so yeah, you can
Yeah.
hear that.
And hello, Hardy. And I see that Ross. Oh, Bob. Bob's son. We haven't seen you for a while. And there's John
I'm hiding.
hiding. Oh, yeah, that's not going to last long. And hello, everybody else. I see Joanne and Goulaire and Ross, Gary. Nice to see everybody. Where's Jeff? Oh, there he is.
No, he's in here.
Yeah.
He had to go down to the Inukshuk.
I've got, anybody recognize this in my background there?
That's Pyramid Island, Pyramid Mountain at the island, isn't it?
No, this one, yeah, you're right. It's Pyramid Mountain in the background. This one, though, is Patricia Lake. And you can see all
Patricia
the,
Lake with the mountain, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you can see all the red, the lodgepole pine, the pine beetle.
Yeah, the last 2 years has seen such a dramatic, well, I guess 3 years now, increase in the amount of red in that whole valley now. It's
Yeah.
all right. All right, so Lorraine's coming in.
Look at this and look at this and this and this.
Okay.
Mr. Vineyard, there's no smoking.
There was a lollipop.
Those are peas,
Yeah.
green
Oh,
peas.
peas. Yeah, there's been fresh peas, fresh zucchini. I've never had zucchini so sweet. I picked up it from the veggie stand around here.
I guess my peas are late because the only thing they've just got their flowers on now. So.
Okay. Yeah, you know, different variety, but oh my God, it's been strawberries. They've been selling out everywhere out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're gonna 2 day. We were thinking of tomorrow, but with the rain, planning on going. We're gonna head to Kraus or Dredager or somebody like that.
I was there in both days yesterday, and they shut down their U-Pick early in both of them.
That many people.
Oh, it's closed?
Yeah.
They had lineup.
Usually the U-Pick is closed.
What's that, Fatima?
U-Pick is closed? I was
Every day
thinking about going there.
Every day, right first thing when they open, there's being big lineups. I talked to both of them,
Yes.
and they both closed at around 2:30, 3 o'clock. Dreidegger actually ran out of strawberries. There was about an hour lineup at Krause to buy them. Oh my God, it was just, it was hilarious.
Yeah, we might end up heading a little bit further west or further east, I should say.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah,
see.
and a lot of the U-Pick places, they don't like you to pick in the rain because certain fruits just get damaged from being so wet. I know
Yeah.
when I was picking cherries, as soon as it started to rain, we had to quit or when it got too hot for the same reason.
Yeah. So, and they haven't been really updating their Facebook pages, but I don't know if you want to call and find out, but
Yeah, a lot of them have been their Instagram is where most of their updates have been there
okay.
in the last little bit. So I've seen Kraus and Driediger have a pretty good setup, but some of them are still, I think, trying to get their COVID plans in place, or at least getting it published so that everyone knows what's happening.
Oh, well, it's June.
All right, Matthew, do you want to start the recording?
So everything's running and rolling right now. So Soledad's just coming in at the moment, and Renzo.
Is John Atkin there?
Hi, John.
Over here. Hi.
Okay, good. Good.
There we go. Marta.
So I'm not late.
Nope,
No.
all good.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Hi, Marta.
Hi.
Okay.
I don't see the little record thing on my thing there, Matthew. So that's why I asked.
It's recording.
It's on.
Okay.
I'm going to, just so everyone knows, once Jeff gets going here, I'm going to mute all of your microphones except for Mr. Atkins and Jeff's. And then once we do our Q&A session afterwards, and I'll unmute it. You can unmute yours when you have your question. All good?
Yep.
Okay, mute all. There we go.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 8th CTGA Zoom meeting. Today, Tuesday, is the 9th of June, 2020. I'm your host, Jeff, along with Matt here and there on our technical end. And this morning, we'd like to welcome Vancouver's John Atkin. John, are you there?
Yes, we're here. Good morning.
John, let's start off just the simple basics of where were you born and raised?
We were actually Victoria based. Grew up there, went through high school, and then moved to Vancouver to go to art school and forgot to go home.
Which art school was that? Was that was the
Well,
Emily Carr started then?
I started at the Vancouver School of Art. Then we went through a brief, almost the British Columbia College of Art, and then it ended up as the Emily Carr. And
Wow.
so we started off on Dunsmuir Street and then ended up on Granville Island before. And then now it's, of course, over on Great Northern, but so we were on the two campuses.
And how did you worked for the city of Vancouver for a number of years, but from art school, I guess I should ask, what were you specializing in, something particular in art?
Wide range of things, but I'm a graphic designer by trade. But I also took off to England and did printmaking because I consider myself a bit of a printmaker, but I'm also a bookbinder. And so in England, I was lucky to study under an amazing fellow, Dick Tullett, an extraordinary bookbinder. And he was the guy that, as Britain was saying goodbye to the colonies through the 50s, the 60s, and into the 70s, they would ring up Dick, and basically he got to bind the new constitution and whatever for the newly independent nations. And so in the year and a half that I was there, he worked on extraordinary documents, and he taught me how to be both respectful and also not precious about things. One evening I was in there working on a project for myself, and a fellow brought in this incredibly rare book of illustrations, and the binding was ripped to shreds, and it was in really, really rough shape. And Dick just sort of took the book and looked at it, and then got his knife out and slit the threads stripped the book down to everything. And the client is like looking at him in horror, and he says, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine." And then he runs off, gets some extraordinary Japanese mulberry paper that's acid-free, gets a big pot of gooey paste, and he proceeds to slather this over the pages and slap down the mulberry. And the guy is just like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Just be quiet, it's fine." And he slaps all this up, sticks it in a press, and he says, "Come back in a week." And the book sat there in the press for a week, and basically the mulberry bound itself to the pages, and that stabilized the book. And then he sewed in a whole new binding, salvaged what bits of the leather and stuff like that. And so it's that sort of care, attention, but not to worry kind of stuff. So in many ways, I learned a lot from Dick, but that was that. So basically graphic design and bookbinding. So bookbinding keeps me sane, because when I've got too much work on, I just stop working. And you can't see it in my office here because I've got the virtual background, but one side over here is research and writing and all that. The other side is the bookbinding table. So then, leaving art school, you know, you got to find a job. And I did freelance for a while, which I don't, in graphic design, I don't like. And there was a temporary job at City Hall for of all things, a cartoonist. And they used to have a publication that the planning department put out. And it was a quarterly magazine on planning issues. And I was hired to be the cartoonist. And I thought, well, this will be fun. That'll pay the bills for a little bit. And I said, and then the job turned permanent. And I thought, well, I'll take it as long as it remains fun. And the fun ran out 30 years later. And we don't need to go into the politics of staff changes, but a certain city manager was hired, and that was it. I had to get out of there. And so in that time, my interests of graphic design, history, and then of course other things, it gelled. And so that's kind of how the slow route to what I now do was developed.
Well, I do want to come back to that city manager maybe later, but because I remember talking to you at the time. We'll do it now. Why would one city manager be, you had met him previously and just didn't want to work with him, or?
Nope, it was, City Hall was actually an extraordinary creative place to be. And one of the reasons that I stuck around as a graphic designer, basically tucked down in the basement, working on a huge range of things. And so graphic design just wasn't doing the cartoons. That morphed into doing everything from full-blown exhibitions for when the World Urban Forum, the United Nations World Urban Forum, came to Vancouver. We produced the city's whole pavilion down at the Canada Place. And in true city fashion too, they gave us something like $10,000 or something to produce something. Government of Canada next door had a budget of $1.5 million for their pavilion. Yeah. But you know, you take that and you do the best you can with it. And we actually turned out something pretty damn good. So there was an incredibly collaborative atmosphere there. And that really comes out of the Art Phillips day, you know, defeat of freeways, defeat of urban renewal, the reevaluation of the city, how we do things, public consultation. And that really ran right through administrations. It crashed a little bit around Sam Sullivan. And then as we moved into the new phase, Vision came in and they, for some reason, hired Penny Ballum. And she single-handedly destroyed the culture of collaboration at City Hall. And she's a top-down micromanager. And we had just folks leave in droves because they couldn't do their job. And that's what happened to me too, because I would go into meetings and we would be told we can't do this, or it took, you know, et cetera. And it just became very difficult to do your job and do it well. And so that's when I basically left. And,
wow.
And we're still paying for that, I think, because the indecision over simple things like the COVID world of let's open up some streets, let's get people not jammed onto sidewalks, but take a lane of traffic, or they're, you know, reimagining of the city and stuff like that. And we've lagged from, you know, other cities. Even the district of North Vancouver is doing more than we are. But the culture isn't there anymore of that collaborative approach. And so it stalls within those little things that fight each other. And that's really that. And the city's got a lot of recovery to do from those 8 years.
So did you when Penny came in, were you sort of alerted that this could be a problem, or did you let her come in and then you found out? And did you give her did people give her a chance before those people all resigned and so on?
She didn't give anyone a chance. That was the problem, was that you walk in a door and you start casting aspersions at how the place functions. Like, nobody had a chance to breathe and sort of say, hey, how are you doing? And this is what we do. It was basically, she came in with the idea that City Hall was screwed and didn't function. And so no one had a chance. And so we lost the best planning director that we ever would have had, which was Brent Todderan. And there's a whole bunch of internal stuff. There's a book in there somewhere, but suffice to say, the city we have today, that with some of the struggles, I think can easily date back to her.
Wow.
Anyway.
And we've seen that before. I've seen that before in my lifetime, where one person comes into a company or a something, and you can tell right away, oh my goodness, and then you try to talk with this person or try to understand them, and you can see their mind is set. There's nothing you're going to be able to say. There's no openness. There's no it's kind of like, if it's your idea, it's a bad idea, but if it's my idea, it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry to hear that. So while you were at City Hall for all those 30 years, you were in the same department within?
Yeah, pretty much. We were in this tiny little funny group called the Graphics Group, which served primarily the planning department, but we ended up, before the city created their communications department, we did stuff for everybody. So, and the projects were a lot of fun. If you walk through Mount Pleasant, for instance, 99% of them are still there. What we call them the tombstones. Basically, we took old granite curbs, stood them on their end, and put in round enameled plaques to bring some of the neighborhood history up to life. And that was part of the local area improvement process back in the 1990s. We've done signage for Chinatown, various big sort of projects in terms of exhibitions and pavilions and things like that. So, you know, my interest in history and things sort of intersected with many of the things that I was doing.
Well, so now let's shift to your wonderful tour guiding aspect.
Mm-hmm.
How did it come about that? Did you start off being a step-on guide, a driver guide, or a walking the neighborhoods? How did that come about? And when, approximately when did you get into that?
Oh, about 30 plus years ago. It came about primarily because of the proposed demolition of the Georgia Medical Dental Building, which used to sit at the corner of Hornby and Georgia.
Yeah.
And someone asked if I wanted to join the Community Arts Council's Heritage Committee. And I had a couple of friends that had joined. And so I joined that. And one of the ways that the Heritage Committee could fund some of the things that it did was they ran a couple of annual walking tours. And so Gordon Price, who used to do the West End tour for the Community Arts Council, caught a cold one weekend. And basically someone said, we need someone to do the walking tour. And everyone sat there going, I don't know how to do a walking tour. And I stupidly put up my hand and said, well, I guess I could do something.
Even Trish is laughing here.
And that's how it began, because in preparing for it, it was digging into like, okay, what am I going to do? And how are we going to do this? And So doing the research and planning the routes and stuff. And so we supported the Community Arts Council's Heritage Committee for a couple of years through the occasional walking tours. The fight over the Georgia Medical Dental Building got ugly. One of their major donors was the developer trying to knock down the Georgia Medical Dental Building. So the executive director made the silly decision to tell the Heritage Committee to not take on the Georgia Medical Dental Building as a cause. And so the whole committee said, nope, see you later, and quit. And so Michael Gluckner and I, along with a couple of other folks, created Heritage Vancouver, which is the group that still exists today. And Michael and I made the very key decision in the early days that we wouldn't take money from anybody, because with our experience with the Arts Council, one major funder says, oh, no, I don't like what you're saying about my project. I'm going to take my money away. Well, that impacts how you can criticize people. And so Michael and I made the key decision was no money from anybody. We would be self-sufficient. And okay, so now we're self-sufficient and we have no money. What do? Well, let's put on a couple of walking tours. So Michael and I did some walking tours, and with his writing skills and various other things, we got, I had connections with a couple of reporters at newspapers. We put in, a note out that said, Michael and John, a walking tour downtown, join us at Victory Square. Our very first walking tour for Heritage Vancouver had 120 people show up.
Ow!
Yeah, I lost my voice. I had lost it for about 2 days after that one. But you see, what back then in 91, 92, the idea of a walking tour was still very like, huh? A walking tour?
Yeah.
And so, we had, that many people show up, and that repeated itself over and over and over. So that we got into a program of doing walking tours. And then we started inviting people to come in and do them, so that we had, either local residents that knew stuff. We got Gordon Price back out on the street. One of our favorites was Mayor Philip Owen. I rang him up and said, you live up in Shaughnessy still? And he goes, yeah. And I said, so you want to do a walking tour of your neighborhood? And he goes, why? I said, because you live there, you grew up there, you could tell us stories. Who's it for? Heritage Vancouver? Oh, you guys that come and complain at council about us knocking down buildings. And I go, yeah. So you're going to complain about Shaughnessy? I said, no, we're going to listen to you, take us around the neighborhood. Yeah, sure, what the hell. So 75 people showed up for Philip's walking tour. And the best thing was he is an incredibly charming and funny man. And so we meet up in Shaughnessy and we go for a walk, and he takes over the street. We didn't stick to the sidewalks, we just took the street over. And the best thing was we were down on the other side of Granville Street on Angus Crescent by the park there. And somebody came up the street in a car and turned into the crowd. And Philip's holding court, telling us about a house and one of the kids that he grew up with. And this guy pulls up behind the crowd and honks his horn. The mayor turned around, walked up to him and said, excuse me, the road is closed. Go that way. And the driver looked at him and was about, I think, honk his horn again. He says, Mayor Philip Owen, the road is now closed. Special event. Move your automobile. And the guy had to back up and take off. And then we carried on. And so that's kind of how we put Heritage Vancouver on the map, was because folks had a lot of fun, but they were out learning stuff. And what we ended up having out of that was so many requests for walking tours that both Michael and I started to do them both for the society, but independently. And then there was a point where I just was having so much fun doing the research and doing quirky tours, like really doing things that weren't sort of stop at building A, talk about famous person, move to next famous building, famous person type thing. anyway, one evening I said to my wife, Robin, I said, you know, we should just try these walking tour things. It's kind of a fun thing to do for the summer. And I put one notice out that said Wednesday night walks. And the first one we did down in the West End. And I said to Robin, I said, you could stick around in case nobody shows up and then you can give me a ride home. And, you know, I don't know, 30, 40 people showed up for a West End walking tour. And that walking tour was timed so that it was just light out, but it was just going to go dusk. And everyone's like, it's going to get dark out. And I go, yeah, it is. That's the whole point. We're going to look in people's windows. And, you know, and the light and how the timing of when you do things changes your perception of things. I used to do, when downtown was a very different animal, we used to do midnight walks, meet down at the CPR station at basically 11:30. And we had a friend of mine who owned a boat, so she would bring the boat light with her and a battery slung over her shoulder and a laser pointer. I bought one of the strongest, brightest laser pointers ever. And we would walk the streets and then stop. And I would say, follow the red light. And we'd go up the building to something. And then she'd turn the boat light on and basically a searchlight. And we would talk about architecture at night, because people were then staring at details. They weren't distracted by other things. In the West End and other places, but the West End in particular, one of my favorite walks is to do something called vanished mansions. And so what we tell people is the walk is about a series of really great big houses. And that's what we're looking at tonight. And I said, you're going to have to use your imagination. And so we go stand in front of an apartment building and not talk about the apartment building, but talk about, say, Mr. Salisbury's house as if it was still standing there. And it was an exercise in teaching people how to sort of visualize and to imagine, and then start contrasting what was there in front of them with hopefully the image that was conjured in their mind. And so that's kind of how the walking tours began.
Well then, and how would, okay, and I'll just guess for a moment that, because ultimately you started to do a few tours as a step-on guide, getting onto a motor coach tour. Is that a yes on that?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
I did get those requests, and I gotta say the first couple were okay, but again, it's something that I have. It's not my forte, just because, you know, I always have to talk to a driver beforehand because I don't want to follow this standard route.
Yeah.
And it's really hard sometimes because one of the first ones, I said to the guy, I said, hey, we're going to go here, 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 and here. Oh, no, we don't go that way. I said, well, I want to go here, here, and here. He says, no, 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 we don't go that way. I said, well, I want to take people here. No, we don't do that. You know, so there's that struggle.
Yeah.
But I also gave up after a few of them because the worst one ever was I got a call. Our guide is ill. Can you take our Gastown tour for us? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So this was a meet the coach. They were going to do a drop and then a pickup. And so the coach shows up and everyone gets off. And I said, are you the group? Yeah. And great. And so I said, so how long is the tour? And he said, oh, we don't know. I said, okay, so what's, you know, because I needed to get some info, and the contact just said basically meet the group at the corner. They had nobody with them. There was no coordinator, no nothing. Anyway, I said, okay, fine. Well, let's, we'll do a walk and we'll do a circular route and we'll pick the bus back up at this spot down by the Europe Hotel. And as I introduced what we were going to do, the coach door closed and took off. And that was it. He took off. And I was left with 35 people on the sidewalk in Gastown and going, so where's your hotel? And how the hell am I going to get you all to wherever you are? And the company never responded to phone calls, emails, and various other things. It was just crazy. And I thought, you know what? I got better things to do than this.
Well, okay. So that's no good. But tell us, how did you end up becoming a? Because I know you do some walking tours in London, and I'm not sure if you also do London, England. I'm not sure if you do a few other walking tours in other cities. But how did that come about?
Oh, well, that's just me. Believe it or not, 15 years ago now, and this year, unfortunately, I've had to, due to COVID and everything else, I've had to cancel this year's tour. But 15 years ago, I put a notice on my website, and all it was at the bottom of the text, all I said was, I'm going to London if anyone wants to join me. And 12 people emailed and said, yeah, sure, we'll come. And so that was basically it. And so I use it as an opportunity. I love London and I know London quite well. And so we use it as an opportunity to explore London and show people a side of the city they wouldn't expect. And, you know, the description says basically, the initial one was, if you're expecting to Buckingham Palace, the changing of the guard and the Houses of Parliament and Trafalgar Square, don't come, because we're not going to show you those things. And the goal is that when they come home and start telling people what they saw, people are going to go, huh? So, you know, we've taken folks out to Victorian sewage pumping stations in furthest southeast London, but an extraordinary cathedral of Victorian cast iron. We've been walking rivers and, you know, doing all sorts of things that are basically off the beaten track, but exploring London in looking at its development and various other things. And so,
did you have to get help from the London Blue Badge? Did you make friend with one of them to learn more stuff, or were you able to do your own research? Or you said you went to London you went there anyway. You mentioned having been in England before anyway, so.
Well, art school was in Croydon, which is 9 miles as the crow flies from central London. I lived in West Norwood, so that was basically 20 minutes by train to either Victoria or London Bridge Station. And while I lived there, I used to map out weekends and things with sort of, take the train up and then we'll go here and here and here. But also, well, and during that time too, and previous visits, the goal was to take a London map and then try and get off the map. And most of the tourist maps of London only go to a certain point. And so I would basically get off at a tube station and see where I was on the map, and then put the map away and try to walk to a point where I didn't know where I was. And then once you were somewhere where you didn't know where you were, how do you get back to wherever, to another tube station? And the goal was never to come back to the tube station you got off on. And by doing that, you find all sorts of strange things and just poke around the city and things. And that's kind of how it came about, was you stumble across stuff, these extraordinary, housing estates built by the Guinness Trust or the Peabody Estates and things like that. Or I used to take old guidebooks out. I have my shelf above me here is filled with old London guidebooks. And so I used to take one of those out, for instance, and try to follow the routes and the maps and stuff, and then come across, of course, areas of huge bomb damage where streets had disappeared, and then look at what had been imposed on the landscape. And so that sort of gave me this, other idea of how to discover and poke about a city. So that's the ultimate goal of the London one, is just to take folks off the beaten track. What has developed, though, which is really intriguing, is that we've done this now for 15 years, and pretty much since the second tour of that, I usually try to keep it only to 14, maybe 15 people. And out of that, 10 have virtually come on every single London tour. So there's actually a social circle of folks that know each other because they came on the London tour. And then folks outside of that get together and do stuff and everything else. And so every year we get maybe 2-3 people that are new, but by the end of the tour, they're like the best friends with everyone else. And so it's really developed into a fun thing.
If you went to London with a group of 10 or 15 people, would you just do one walking tour for them on one specific night, or did you have several planned for them?
What we do is it's basically 9:30 in the morning in the hotel lobby, and off we go. And we do that we go for Thursday night, which is pub night, say hello to everybody. Friday morning, we start walking, and we go right through till the following Wednesday. So there's a walk every morning. And then what we do is we're in the pub by 1 o'clock, and then lunch. And so then, and the way we make the fee up is that I buy lunch 3 times out of the thing. And on Thursday night, I buy the first round of drinks. And then after that, you see, it's all timed so that lunch is, say, over by 2:30 or something, 2. And people are like, the afternoon and the evenings are free. So that way they can do their own thing, and they're not beholden to what I want them to do. And then, you know, very often then what I'll do is I'll be off doing some walks and researching and stuff. And many times people tag along. And so, you know, I'm poking around, but they're following and stuff like that. So, but that's how it works. It's basically morning to the pub, and then the day is over.
Now, had this interruption of everything for COVID-19 2020, would you have had so you've been retired now a couple of years. So have you been spending the summer tour season doing anything here with tourists, or what would you have done this year had this all not come along? Like, you can do walking tours of Vancouver at any time of the year. They're primarily for local folks, although tourists are welcome to come along. So I'm just curious, what was a normal summer for you the last 2 or 3 summers? What's changed this summer? Obviously, you can't do much of anything.
Well, this summer, my calendar for the tour side of it is completely and utterly empty.
Join them.
Yeah. No, it's all gone. But if last year, for instance, so what I do is I do walks throughout the year for the Heritage Foundation, for instance, because we do a series of Saturday walks starting in May, and we run those through to October. And it has a loose theme to it. The idea is that, and this year we were going to walk Victoria Drive. So we were going to start at the northern end of Victoria Drive at Powell. And by the end of October, we would be at the Fraser River. And the spine was Victoria Drive and just different spots along the road. So last year, you know, we had the Heritage Foundation walks through the summer and into fall. And I do a lot of walks for different groups. So the Arbutus Club's 25-year club, we do a walk once a year. The various Probus clubs, we've now got 3 or 4 of those that I do walks for. There's a group of gardeners in North Van that every now and then they ring me up and they go, we want to go for a walk. And so I figure out something. So I do those sorts of things as well. And then the only sort of organized stuff I still do is the Rhodes Scholar folks, which is the old Elder Hostel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You must have known Eric, I think it was, right? The fellow, I may have his name wrong, but he's Austrian or German fellow, and he volunteered his time for years and years and years, picking up students for no charge, or young folks for no charge.
Yeah.
At the hostel on Burnaby Street at Thurlow, and probably the Discovery at Lurcano Beach or Jericho Beach. And Eric, anyway, you must have ran into him. Yeah,
very much. But so way back in the midst of time, I started with one of the local coordinators out here, And all I did was I came in and did a brief talk. And I started long ago that I still had a slide projector to produce the talk.
I still have one.
Well, I have one here too, just in case. But no, I did a slideshow to introduce people to Vancouver and some of the aspects of it. And then we would jump on a bus and we would do a city tour. And that was kind of the Rhodes Scholar thing. And then then they developed another program. And so I did something for that. And it's grown into now where my calendar is such that if I did every single Rhodes Scholar program that they announced in Vancouver, I'd have to split myself into about 6. And so I get the list of programs and then I go over it and see where all the different conflicts are, because of course, while they sit the same office in Kingston, Ontario, they seem unable to recognize that if this program is on a Monday at 9, then the other program can't have John speaking at Monday at 9. And so there are dates where, there are 3 or 4 things stacked on top of each other. So I map out my summer of what I can fit in. And then I used to then try to find folks, but now there's a roster of folks that I've directed them to where they then independently bring them up and hand them off stuff and things. So that usually keeps me quite busy through the summer months. And so this year, of course, they're still optimistic. So they've only canceled things to the end of July, but
Okay. Yeah.
the border's not opening anytime soon. And
well, are you getting things done around the house? Have you been able to get caught up on some things like we all have that you
don't I wish
you hadn't done? Oh my goodness.
No, the perverse thing is, as the tour side of it just dropped off the map, the consulting side has come up. And one of the other things that I do is heritage consulting on buildings. I work very closely with a colleague of mine. We just finished 3 years of work up in the Kootenay region, working in places like Fernie and Fernie and Nelson, Cranbrook, Kimberley, and working on a variety of different projects and things like that. And so we also do a lot of consulting here. And this year, even though COVID showed up, the consulting work is huge. And so I've been glued to my desk writing conservation plans, statements of significance, and a variety of other things. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of things around the house. It's like, oh, I should paint the doors. I should clean the gutters. I should do whatever. I haven't got to them because my day is say goodbye to Robin and come up here and sit at my desk by 9. And Robin comes in the front door about 5:30 and it's like, oh, right, I should have had lunch. Because I'm at the desk working a lot. And what's really interesting too is that previously you'd be doing a mix of things, some walks and site inspections and a bit of writing. Now we're glued to our desk doing a heck of a lot of just consulting work. So that's taken over the slack then.
So these people are from the Kootenays who want some heritage consulting.
Yep.
They're what are they sending you pictures of buildings and wondering whether or not this should be a designated a building that can't be torn down, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of assessment work. So my colleague and I, was a lot of the work up there. The Columbia Basin Trust has a lot of money because they're the trust set up to take funds from the Columbia River project and spend it for local improvements throughout the Columbia District. And one of their programs, they ran a 3-year program on heritage, which was basically community owned or nonprofit owned. And it was significant funding for the assessment of buildings, coming out with a conservation plan, for instance, sometimes just doing a management plan and various other, or just straight assessment. So up in Creston, for instance, one of the more fun jobs was Creston has those two extraordinary grain elevators that, you know, as soon as you drive in, they dominate the scenery. And if you're coming out from Nelson, you come through the valley, across the farmlands, and suddenly, boom, there's this big white elevator and a big red elevator. And if you're coming in the other way, they terminate the main street in town. And the owner of the elevators wanted to sell them. And the town was concerned they might be demolished because they're massive chunks of lumber that are quite valuable just for the wood that's in them. But the town didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to buy them or pay for it or anything else. So the Columbia Basin Trust stepped up and hired us to come out to Creston and evaluate the elevators. Are they in good condition? Are they worth saving? What would we do with grain elevators once we save them? And how would you conserve a grain elevator? And so that was a lot of fun because grain elevators are complex buildings. And we also, the only way you climb, to assess an elevator, there's no elevator in the elevator. There is one single ladder that is 1.5 feet wide, which is, you know, that, with wooden rungs nailed to the 2x4s. And so to assess, we had to climb the ladder to get up into the loft and everything else. And I gotta say, that was both the most exciting and scariest thing we've done recently, because 3/4 of the way up, not your elbows, but your shoulders are going, ouch, can we stop this, please? This really hurts.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, oh, workers' compensation is calling.
Oh yeah, harnesses? No, there weren't any. So you get all the way up to the top of the building, and again, you have to assess and you're doing a condition assessment. So you're looking at things and you're poking. And then, you know, you do all that, take tons of photographs, and then you turn around, you go, oh crap, I've got to get down. And that's the problem, is that you suddenly have to go through the hole in the floor. And I made the mistake of looking down to find the top rung of the ladder. And I realized that that's an incredibly far way down to the floor. And that actually hurt more because now you're holding yourself up by your shoulders and the elbows. And boy, when you get down, you really felt the workout. But it's so much fun because the buildings are part of the town history. And so you're not just looking at the grain elevator, but you're putting the grain elevators into the context of the town, and you're getting into what they mean and you know, what they mean to the town and all sorts of things. So again, that interest in history and to a certain degree, the tours inform the consulting work, because the town recognized that the elevators were an icon for the city. And so they wanted to keep them. But then part of the assessment was, well, how would you involve tourism with the elevators? And then could you adapt a single purpose building to something else that would serve the tourism? And so they become really interesting exercises in not just straight heritage work, but that whole range of things that involve tourism and stuff like that.
All right. Well, let me just ask you before we ask the members if they have any questions for you. What are the top 2 or 3 buildings in Vancouver right now that you think are possibly in danger, are probably heritage buildings and should not come down? And of course, I want to ask you what that backdrop is behind you. Is that the day Houdini was in town?
No, this is Chinatown. This is Carroll Street. Oh, my finger disappears when I point. On my, because it's flipped for me. Yeah. But anyway, the men over here, these are Chinese men reading the Chinese Times at the newspaper office. Oh, this is 1956 or so. And then you can see the BC Electric building just in the background there with its long neon sign. And the sign behind me is the West Hotel. So we're standing pretty much at Pender and and Carol in Chinatown. And, you know, sometimes I leave the virtual background off and just sit in my crazy office, and other times the office is a bit of a distraction, so I throw up this as the backdrop. In terms of buildings that are under threat, there's nothing stunningly significant. Like we've gone through the trials and tribulations of losing major landmarks. You know, you go back to the 70s and big fight, and I think most significant loss would have been the Burke's building, for instance, at Georgia and Granville. I think losing the Georgia Medical Dental building was also a huge mistake, and things. But when you start looking around now, in the downtown core, the buildings that should be protected are pretty much protected. And there are a few smaller scale things that, you know, potentially could be under threat. But in the scheme of heritage preservation, what's really interesting is that the developers are aware that there's value in the heritage building. Now, how it's conserved or preserved, that's a whole other matter, because sometimes you just get facades and sometimes you get, you know, sort of awkward juxtapositions. And I rode the Arbutus Greenway the other day, and I hadn't seen a project that I knew about. It was a lovely little 2-story apartment building, and it was the Kirkland Metal Shop. And that building was saved, but there's a honking great condo that grows out of the roof and to the side of it. And, you know, that one's not badly done. The level of conservation on what survives is well done. But other times you do get some very strange juxtapositions and things. But I don't think in the scheme of heritage preservation within the downtown core, there's much that is in real danger that's of significance. I think we still haven't grappled with just simple renovation and restoration work on ordinary things. And one of the things that I struggle with when I get a request for a conservation plan, for instance, on a house, is that the starting point is the building inspectors show up and they're going to insist on trying to take a 120-year-old house and make it fit today's building code. And that's pretty much impossible. And if you're strata titling it, say turning a house into, say, 2 condos, but then homeowner warranty protection shows up and they say, well, you need a rain screen. Well, a rain screen on an old house means off comes the siding, off comes everything, and you're down to the studs. And then when you rebuild it, you've built a replica. And that's what we haven't managed to, in Vancouver, come to terms with. When we work in New Westminster, for instance, it's a very different matter. There, they take heritage very seriously, and their building inspectors and things actually achieve a much higher degree of retention. And certainly when you head out into the interior and doing some work in Fernie, their building official there, he's got his head screwed on really straight because he works with owners to go, you know what, the code says you have to do this. Well, if you did it this way, that kind of meets the spirit of the code and it saves this important aspect of your building. So Vancouver's a strange place because we keep talking about we love heritage or want to save heritage, but you know, for the vast majority of stuff, it's a massive compromise, and we don't practice conservation within the city. So that's where I think the threat to the city's heritage is really in our residential heritage, the smaller scale stuff. And you know, in Shaughnessy, we have a heritage conservation area that really isn't a heritage conservation area. And there, I think, while there's supposedly heritage conservation, again, houses get stripped right down to the studs. And in one case, a very important house, they left the gable up on 2x4s and tore the rest of the house down and then rebuilt behind the gable. And that was considered enough heritage. So that's where the threat lies.
Somebody asked a question on our chat about Burnaby. Of course, there's we've seen in the news, especially around Metrotown, a lot of older buildings coming down. But do they have any kind of a heritage committee or people who are kind of looking out for them?
Yeah, they've got they've got their heritage commission or heritage committee. I've got 2 projects in Burnaby right now, and one of them is actually a really interesting house by a fellow that. He was involved in a whole bunch of stuff, and he lived in New Westminster. And when he moved to Burnaby, to Canada Way, he built the identical house he lived in New Westminster, which is kind of fun. It's being subdivided and redeveloped and things, but there, the heritage planner, is a good standard of sort of, no, we'll do it this way, and let's do this, and let's make this happen. And so Burnaby, where it can, is certainly trying to save things. And I think there's the struggle for Burnaby is that it's got these great arterials like Edmonds and Kingsway, which are transportation routes, the streetcars and stuff, which is all single-story retail. And, trying to save single-story retail is hard. And so, in many ways, Burnaby's sort of doing what Vancouver did back in the 70s. They're just starting to do that now. And so there's still some good conservation though in Burnaby, and certainly their current heritage planner and senior heritage planners are really good.
All right, I do have some other questions, but I'll let anyone else who's on our Zoom meeting, does anyone else have any questions or something you wanted to ask John Atkin? I'll just quickly add that for you newer members of the association, newer tour guides and so on, at our various Zoom meetings over the last 7 previous meetings, you do hear the speakers mention former Vancouver Mayor Art Phillips and the team, TEAM, the Electors Action Movement. You should read up on them. They were an amazing time. Who was the mayor just before Art Phillips? And when Art Phillips won, was it expected that the other existing mayor was going to win? But Art Phillips just came in, and he was charismatic and tall, handsome fellow and so on.
Yep. Well, Art was an investment banker, but he had been on council previously. And one of the things that he worked on was the committee for the transformation of the South Shore of False Creek, where they took city-owned land, and there's a long story about how they ended up owning it, but that's for another time. But they had city-owned land basically from the Burrard Street Bridge to the Cambie Bridge, and it was sawmills and boat yards and things. And there was a fairly significant sawmill fire in the 1960s. And so the city then took the sawmill fires and other things and thought, you know what, there's got to be something else that we can do here. And that was what the committee's sort of significant role was, is that they didn't just have planners. They brought in folks from UBC, they brought in Thompson, Barrack and Pratt, the architecture firm, and a variety of other folks, and said, what can we do here? And what they came up with was what we have today, which is the housing that's there on the South Shore. And it was breaking all the planning rules in terms of it was clustered, it was dense. Now, you walk through South False Creek today and you go, dense? You got to be kidding. They're nice low-rise townhouses, but for the day, they were actually extraordinary high density. My favorite headline of the day was the Vancouver Sun, in an article talking about the plans for the South Shore of False Creek, actually said that if the city of Vancouver proceeds with this housing project at such high densities, they will create nothing but a slum filled with hookers and drug dealers.
Now, why did they say that? I remember that era and being on a tour bus with a guide who said that. And I thought, why would you think why did the Suns think just because it was low rise buildings that it was going to be a slum in the future. Of course, it isn't, by the way. The picture behind me is Falls Creek South. I just live beside Mahoney and Sons restaurant, so I'm up and down between Granville Island and the Olympic Village quite a lot.
Well, I think what it was so different because the form of South Falls Creek was those clusters of housing groups. And, you know, on a numbers basis, it was incredibly high density, which we didn't have, because you have to remember, the West End at this point was only just beginning to, you know, show up in the high-rise form. And, you know, they were still, had just debated and stopped the destruction of the east side of the city that was going to be replaced with public housing projects. And so there were some fights over in Kitsilano about the demolition of big old houses and apartment buildings. And so the South Shore Falls Creek was seen as sort of a radical experiment, and it's dense, and it's like, we haven't seen this before, and how can so many people live together and actually, you know, survive and be nice and all that sort of stuff. And so that was sort of the genesis of where Vancouver starts, you know, the city that now gets the plaudits from other cities about livability and planning. But Art was on the committee that was shepherding that through. And what was so interesting was the mayor of the day was, of course, Mayor Tom Campbell, Tom Terrific. And yeah. And he was actually a somewhat lazy mayor because he had a home in Hawaii, and so he kept going to Hawaii. And so as the committee was beginning to get ready to present things to council and move it onwards, Campbell came back from one of his Hawaii trips and got in there and started, you know, causing trouble and criticizing. And Phillips was in the newspaper. He was quite quotable all the time. And he said, you know, our committee's been doing great work, but, you know, it's too bad when the mayor comes home because, you know, we get into all sorts of discussions and things slow down. And my only wish for the new year would be if the mayor just stayed in Hawaii more often. And so, you know, and Tom,
that ruffles some feathers, I'm sure.
Just a bit. And so you couple the South Shore discussion with the dying days of the freeway discussion, you know, and they finally put the nail in the coffin of the freeway in 1968 and said no more freeway. But the Georgia Viaducts opened in 1972. And that was met with huge protests. And one of the things was, of course, they opened the viaducts, the mayor, they still had an official city limousine. And so they started at one end of the viaducts and did the whole procession across the viaducts and ribbon cuttings. And when they got to the city side, they were met by a huge crowd. And Michael Gluckner was in the crowd, and the limo didn't slow down. It just went through the crowd. If there had been cell phones back then, there would have been extraordinary video. And Michael remembers having his feet almost run over by the mayor's car. And that was sort of the imagery that struck, was, you know, people against the mayor and things. Years later, Michael interviewed Campbell about a couple of things. And before he left the interview, he said, you know, I got to ask you, you were in the limo driving across the viaduct. The car didn't slow down. You just about ran over my feet. What the heck were you thinking? And he goes, well, there was a luncheon at the Bayshore and we were late.
So let's kill some people on the way. No big deal.
Yeah, no pretty much.
Oh,
so yeah. So there, what ended up with was the defeat of the freeway system, the defeat of the urban renewal project, which Campbell hadn't started, but Campbell certainly fought to preserve, and a number of other things. There was really a feeling that something new had happened, and Campbell wisely looked at sort of the world and sort of went, you know what, I'm not going to run for mayor again. And that's when Art Phillips stepped up. And the idea was to try to break the party system. And so it was, a team was the Citizens Election Action Movement. And it was, in theory, a nonpartisan sort of group of folks, like-minded folks and things. And that's what gave Mike Harcourt his start. He was an alderman at that point, and various other things. And then,
yeah, go ahead.
Art basically set the standard for what we've been, for much of the time, working on that continuous arc of city building, good planning, public consultation, all those things that we take for granted in the city.
All right. Somebody on the chat asked if you could tell us a little bit about Water Street, the history and conservation plans. Well, you and I know that in the early 70s, it was designated a heritage area along with Chinatown.
Yep.
The buildings can't be touched. You can do some bit of modification, but I'm more concerned about that damn street. It's so god-awful, bumpy, and terrible. And I know, is Lenora Sally still in charge of the business improvement there?
No, she finally, after eons, retired. And so there's a whole new crew over at the Gastown Business Improvement Society. No, Water Street was one of her big bugbears because, Gastown and Chinatown were designated as provincial heritage districts in 1971. One of the delights about that and modern history is that you often hear that they were designated to save them from the freeway. But the freeway was dead by 1968. And so the delightful reason is that we have our two premier heritage districts, Gastown and Chinatown, for the sole reason that there was Sunday shopping.
Mm-hmm.
When the hippies moved down from 4th Avenue to Water Street and started taking up some of the empty storefronts in the old warehouses and stuff, they opened on Sundays. And the Vancouver Police Department, which wasn't an extraordinarily enlightened organization back then, basically came down and shut them down. The Lord's Day Act, you can't sell anything on a Sunday. And they rightfully pointed at Chinatown and went, Chinatown? Well, Chinatown had always been allowed for whatever reason to just do its thing. And the cops unwisely went over to try to close the Chinatown stores. So then you had Chinatown and Gastown, the hippies, in front of City Council going, we want to shop on Sundays. And there was no way for the city to waive a provincial law. However, they had just brought in new legislation around tourism development. And if you were a designated tourism area economic thing, or through the heritage legislation, a heritage district, you could then waive certain provincial laws for tourism development. And so overnight, that's how Gastown and Chinatown became historic areas for Sunday shopping. And then it was in the later period through 73, 74 that they did the beautification. And that meant the cobblestone streets and the brick sidewalks and the maple trees that hide the buildings and all that. And the dragon lights that are down there, the old-fashioned lights, interestingly, they were everywhere else in the city except on Water Street and Cordova Street. They were in Chinatown, they were on Granville Street, they were in my neighborhood, Strathcona, but they never appeared on Water Street. But someone found a lamp standard in the city works yard and went, oh, that looks cool. And they recast them and put them down Water Street.
Yeah.
So they envisioned it much more as a European strolling, pedestrianized sort of area. And you look at some of the early photographs, Maple Tree Square, for instance, had tables way out into what is now traffic areas. And there was a lot more sort of a relaxed vision for the neighborhood. Unfortunately, when you cobblestone the streets and then turn it into a truck route, the cobblestones will break and wobble and you end up, the road sinks. And they've reset the street a couple of times and it's now in an atrocious mess. But the big debate is, what do you do with Water Street? The sensible thing is to pave it in asphalt. But of course, the character defining element for Gastown is its cobblestone street. But the tour buses and the trucks and the heavy traffic that goes down Water Street doesn't work with that material. So then it's like, okay, let's pedestrianize Water Street. Okay, how do you manage the tour business with the tour buses and things? Because one person said, the planner said, well, we just park the buses and you take them for a walk. And I said, and where would you park the buses? Well, there's got to be places to park buses. And I said, have you taken a tour bus out recently and tried to park it somewhere? And so that, you know, and then he foolishly said, well, isn't there something down by the helicopter? And I said, okay. How do you get them from the heliport to Water Street? Like, come on, kids, like, think about this. So that's where they're at right now. There's actually, just before COVID hit, there was going to be a whole raft of public consultation and workshops to look and rethink Water Street and things. It's part of the larger improvements because Blood Alley Square, the improvements there, had just got almost final approval just before the current situation started. And so, you know, Blood Alley Square gets the improvements, then it was going to be Water Street. And we saw some of the very tentative improvements at Maple Tree Square where they suddenly pushed the bollards way out into the roadway and basically made a single lane of traffic coming off of Powell onto Water. And they also, you know, around the statue pushed the bollards out, and so they're starting to reclaim the road space there. And that's part of a much larger project. It's been stalled given the current situation.
Somebody asked me to ask you about the continuing gentrification of Chinatown. Chinatown, unfortunately, has got a couple of issues. Of course, the downtown east side folks, Gastown sees a lot of that as well. It's hard not to drive through either of the two districts and see street people. And of course, many of the tourists see that, thinking to themselves, I'd like to come back here, but boy, there seems to be a lot of less fortunate people here. I'm not sure if it's safe. What do you see as potentially happening, if anything, to help with the situation there? Yeah.
Well, again, COVID has knocked everything off the pedestal for Chinatown. I do an awful lot of work. Currently, I'm a vice president of the Chinese Canadian Historical Society, and I also, at the moment, currently chair the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Gardens Board, and among many other things. So I'm deeply involved in Chinatown, and we've been working with the city since the apology that they made to the Chinese Canadian community on a number of initiatives around Chinatown. And revitalization is the wrong word, but it's continuance and enhancement and various things. It's a struggle because we're caught in a couple of different things. Our neighbors to the north are a bit of a challenge. And I think one of the biggest failures of this city has been that we have somehow dropped the ball on all of the things that we should be doing to help folks that need the help. And as the rest of the city is developing, we're losing resources in other areas. And so folks are getting pushed into that downtown east side area in much tighter concentrations that we ever saw. But the lack of sort of service and help there has exacerbated things. And then in Chinatown, what we have is that period of change, because a lot of the stores and shops that everyone's familiar with, a lot of folks are hitting their 80s and above in some cases and retiring. And, you know, the world of shopping has changed as well, because a lot of the folks that would regularly shop in Chinatown are also getting old. And so the number 22 bus, for instance, 10 years ago, in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, right through until about 10, would be jammed with all the folks from South Vancouver going to Chinatown to do the daily shopping. And then you just knew that if you needed to get home, you would not catch the 22 at 3:30 because the bus was jammed with everyone heading back to South Vancouver. But those ladies that shop are leaving us. And my neighbors around me, since I've lived here, all of the old neighbors have all passed on. So we were on that demographic hump of folks that immigrated here in the 50s and 60s, now, retiring from business and or passing on. So Chinatown is going through a natural evolution of change. And one of the things that the city did stupidly was think that the way to save Chinatown was to rezone it so that you had 150-foot tall condo buildings with 200-foot frontages, which, that's not conducive to mom and pop stores. And that was a huge battle a couple of years ago where the community fought the city tooth and nail to get the zoning changed so that it came back down to very reasonable levels. And the success of that is that when that succeeded and the city agreed to downzone, a developer came up to me and said, well, I hope you're happy. That means we can't build anything in Chinatown. And I said, well, that's the whole point, is to get you guys to go away and give Chinatown a chance to just breathe and figure itself out. So part of that and the apology that the city made is doing a lot of the work they should have been doing way back when, which is figuring out what is Chinatown. Because we see the street life as you walk down the streets, you see some empty stores, you see some, new shops, and we're certainly seeing some what might be loosely called non-Chinese businesses come into the neighborhood. What you don't see is the internal life. The societies, for instance, we've got 90 plus different associations and societies headquartered in Chinatown. You have all the family and clan and district associations are active with members. And so you've got that internal life to the neighborhood. And we're starting to see new businesses come in, and this is the interesting conundrum. So one of my favorite coffee shops is up on Penter Street, and they do a really decent cappuccino. And so when I have a meeting, if it's a lunch meeting, I drag them over to the Ovaltine because I want to get them over to the Ovaltine. Grace needs the customers. But if it's just coffee, I take them to Propaganda. And I had one person say to me, oh, I'm not going there. I said, well, why? Well, who gentrified coffee shop? No, we need to support local business. And I said, well, you ever asked who owns the gentrified coffee shop? It happens to be a couple of young Chinese Canadians who happen to like good coffee. And there's our perception problem, is that sometimes we think of districts in one way and how they should be versus changing folks and other things. And so the hope in Chinatown, and I think what will bring a different Chinatown about, is this extraordinary youth movement, a very vibrant group of young folks doing all sorts of things through the Yarrow Society, for instance, is an outreach society for Chinese seniors. And they do a ton of different projects with them. You've got the Doris and June Chow. What they do is the Mahjong series down at the Pioneer Square in Chinatown brings both the seniors out and young folks out and the Guailos to learn Mahjong, and it's a really great thing. And you've got Kevin over at the Wall Foundation doing a lot around food security. So last year and the year before, the courtyard at the Dr. Sen Yat-sen Garden and the Cultural Center became a pop-up farmers market for local produce. And they offered essentially food boxes from local farmers, which you subscribe to. And so they organized a produce market and a pickup spot for everyone that had ordered produce. So all of that activation and things. And even the garden, we're working on a couple of projects with the Cultural Center to enliven the space and bring some history to the streets and things like that. And then the city itself delayed because they've got the team transferred over to the recovery team. But once the city's back on its feet after COVID, there's a number of initiatives in Chinatown that I think will serve the district well. So it's going through that awkward stage right now of a transition from one generation to the next generation. And there will be a little bit of pain in there, but bright spots, Chinatown barbecue, one of the best barbecue joints, etc. We've got Fat Mao, which is really great noodles and things. Jade Dynasty just is opening, I think, today or tomorrow. We've got a couple of new restaurants coming in as well, Asian themed, etc. So there is life in Chinatown, and I think, as Mark Twain said, the reported my death is greatly exaggerated, and I do think that there's a lot of strength within Chinatown, and certainly the crew that's coming up and paying attention to it. And at some point, Carol Lee, which opened Chinatown Barbecue, and the foundation, the Chinatown Foundation, is behind the Storytelling Center, which will open sometime next year. We have the Chinatown Chinese Canadian History Museum. They've just put their board of directors together, so they're working on some things. And the Vancouver Museum's new exhibit, A Seat at the Table, which is about Chinese immigration to British Columbia through food. It's an interesting idea. The main exhibit's at the museum, but we have a satellite in Chinatown that's going to open in the Hong Sing Athletic Building. And so there's all sorts of things, I think, that will give both the locals and tourists, when we see them again, a lot of opportunity to explore the district. And then when you get that activity back on the street, then you start to lessen the impacts of our neighbors to the north. And Chinatown is very, concerned about that, but we're working hand in hand with the city to get them to do stuff that benefits those folks. And so it's not about trying to push people away, but it's trying to get the city to take some action. And certainly on my tours, when I do a lot of school tours for the garden or something, we've got teachers that are a bit nervous, and we just address the problem forthright. It's like, these are our neighbors, and here are some of the issues they have to deal with, and we need to treat them with respect. And, you kind of have to bring it up forthright and not try to shy away from it.
You mentioned Pioneer Square in Chinatown. That is which part of Chinatown do you mean?
That's at the foot of Kiefer and Columbia Street. It's got the monument of the Chinatown Pioneers.
With the monument of the Chinese Canadian soldier and the railroad worker.
That's correct.
Some of our members may not be aware that of the new, it'll be on Pender, I think, at Columbia, the Chinatown Museum, or what was it called again?
Well, we have, at the moment, there's a satellite exhibit for the Chinese Canadian History Museum. This is a project from the City of Vancouver and the provincial government. And so there's a satellite office there that has some exhibitry, and it talks about Chinese Canadian history, and it's kind of to get folks excited about the museum coming. And the new board has just been put in place, and so they're going to be working through coming out with what the museum is going to be. And one of the key ideas around the museum is not to be one physical space where everyone goes to, but you have what's called a hub and then spokes. And the idea is that Chinatown is the museum. So you might show up at the Chinese Gate and then be drawn down Shanghai Alley, but then come through Suzhou Alley into hopefully what will get named soon, Chinese Opera House Alley, which is the space between the Cultural Center and the Chinese Garden. And that's where the first Chinese Opera House was. So, you walk through there, and then you've got some history displays within the courtyard. But then you go across the street to the Seat at the Table exhibit, up the street to the Storytelling Center. So Chinatown becomes the museum, and then there would be a hub of some exhibitry and things like that, where you can program things as well. So it's an emerging concept, but that's now moving ahead. And there's a number of other things like that. So I think the future for Chinatown is actually, it's give us a bit, but it's going to be quite good, I think.
Somebody asked about the Hastings Street, the blocks where bylaws don't seem to be followed or not enforced. And of course, that's the whole policing thing, I guess.
It's a policing thing and a social thing. It's a really tough one because, if you moved any of that activity 6 blocks in either direction, everybody would shut it down in a nanosecond. we're still struggling with that one. And I know Chinatown merchants struggle with that because there is actually an authorized and legitimate street market. But what we don't seem to be able to do is control all the rest of the sidewalk stuff. And the police, you know, have assured the Chinatown community at numerous meetings that, oh yeah, they're on top of it. And everyone in the meeting mutters under their breath, you know, audibly, a giant BS. And it is a problem because, you know, without putting too fine a point on it, you know, Mingwo, before they closed, you know, would get shoplifted 11, 12, 13 times a day. And if they wanted to, they could go over probably to the street and find it, you know, on the sidewalk. And so there is that level of things. But it's, I don't know how to solve it. Policing just by itself is not going to solve it. But you need all of the other services. You need all of those, you know, you need the housing, and you need much more in the way of help and safe supply, I think, on the drugs and various things like that. And we just seem to have made a huge amount of progress to a certain point. And then we've seemed to have dropped the ball. And that's, I think, where we've really, I think as a city, I think we've really let ourselves down by not getting a grip on that and doing the right thing. And so that's the really tough part, I think. And yeah, it can't be just cleaned up, but it needs to be dealt with on multiple levels. And because we could house folks from Oppenheimer Park fairly quickly, well, then we should be doing that and being very, very proactive on the housing front. Because as Jim Green used to say, you know, you give somebody a room and a place to cook, suddenly their health goes way up. And, you know, we need to be providing those basic needs and stuff like that.
I couldn't let you go without getting you to quickly tell us the story of there's two gates in Chinatown, the one on Pender Street just before Carroll, straddling the whole width of Pender Street, the Chinatown Millennium Gate. But a lot of people mistakenly call that the China Gate from the Chinese Pavilion at Expo 86, which of course, when the fair was over, that Chinese gate was moved to the plaza in front of the cultural center on Pender Street.
Correct.
But it rotted away. It rotted away. They didn't refurbish it or build a replica. And the one that's up there now with kind of white panels on it. I remember you telling me the story one time. It's a god-awful thing, but I've forgotten the gist of what is that gate that's there?
Yes. Well, the Expo, the World's Fair Gate, was never meant to last more than the 6 or 8 months of the fair. It was quite literally built out of masonite. And, you know, when you stick it up at the cultural center, they stuck the masonite up at the cultural center. But if you don't touch it up with a bit of paint or clean it and various things, it's going to rot. And it did. And there was a decent windstorm one evening, and it ripped a humongous chunk off the gate, and it fell down, and they had to take it down.
Yeah.
So we had these bare columns in front of the cultural center for a while.
Four pillars there.
Yeah. And there had been a gift from one of the municipal authorities in China, and I believe it was the Guangzhou. I think the city gave the cultural center these marble panels that form the current gate. But the problem was they really didn't know what to do with them, because it's kind of like, okay, we've got these things, but how do we put them up there or whatever? Anyway, it turns out that the official that organized the panels was visiting, and it's like, oh crap, he's coming. It's like grandmother, right? They're visiting, and oh, that awful Christmas present you got, it's in the basement. Where we got to get it out. And so basically they hired somebody to get the panels up, and well, his solution was there was a couple of steel beams up there, so drill through the panels, put some big lag bolts in, and bolt them to the gate posts. And that's why you can see the panels and then these bloody great washers and bolts there, and it looks dead ugly.
And the signs at the bottom of the 4 poles there still say it's the Chinatown. It's the China Gate from the China Pavilion at Expo 86.
I know.
Which it's not.
Yeah. Yep. You know that, I know that, and everyone else. So no, and that was sort of like one of those things of, oh, really? And yeah, we've just never managed to get, you know, either just some repair work done to hide the bolts and various other things. Anyway, so that's that one. And then the other gate, though, was a real concerted effort by everyone in Chinatown to mark the western boundary of Chinatown, just because Chinatown's very different from other Chinatowns because A, it didn't have a gate, but also, you know, if you come down Pender Street, there's nothing really that signifies, hey, here's Chinatown. And, you know, the narrow building, you can slow the bus down. Oh, there's the narrow building. You turn the corner. But there's nothing that really sets Chinatown visually apart from the rest of the city until you get in there. And the community was really struggling through the 90s, you know, because we had the, I guess, the rush and excitement of the World's Fair. And then there was that lull for Chinatown. And so the community got organized and recognizing that the clock was going to turn over in 2000. And so they organized this gate project. And it's really cool because the gate itself is based on the village gates that you would find throughout the southern region of China in the Guangdong province. Much smaller, but they would, all villages have a gate at the entrance. And so the architect Joe Wei looked at a ton of these things and came up with a version that would fit Chinatown. And so it was delayed due to engineering concerns and transit concerns and various other things. So the Millennium Gate opened in 2003. But it is kind of unique because
I think it was 2002. I was reading the plaque on that recently.
Okay.
It was supposed to open in 2001, but they couldn't arrange then Prime Minister Jean Chrétien to get there at an appropriate time. I think the gate was running late. The construction of it.
No, the gate was late too because of construction and all manner of things. But it did open a couple of years after that. But the cool thing is the roof of the gate is Chinese tile roofs from, I guess, the Chinese gate tile roof factory or something. But what's interesting is underneath it is what would be timber in a traditional gate is actually steel. So painted steel and things to make it look like wood. And then all that fabulous decoration across panels and everything, that's actually high-tech vinyl. So instead of having all that sort of glazed and painted work that would look lousy in the rain after a couple of months and need repair, what they do is hired the artist to draw it all out, put all the shadows in, all the highlights so it looks three-dimensional, and stick it on the steel beams. So that way when the seagulls crap on it, you can just hose it off. And it's UV protected and all of that. So it looks like an authentic gate, but it's actually quite a high-tech gate.
Okay, and so someone just asked why it was called the Millennium Gate, because that's when it was supposed to open, was in the new millennium.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the big turnover in the year 2000 and celebrate Chinatown with the Millennium Gate. And then it was a couple of years late. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any questions from anybody else?
Yeah, I do.
Audible questions. There's Hardy. Go ahead, Hardy.
I have a few comments to make.
Mm-hmm.
John, you and I, you don't know that, but you and I have worked around each other for decades without ever meeting. And I was chuckling a few times when you mentioned Nelson and Castlegar. In the 60s, I was one of the junior design engineers of the High Arrow Dam.
Oh, okay.
And later on, when you talked about the Georgia Viaduct, this is actually my bridge. I was,
okay.
I was one of the, I would say, assistant engineers there. And in 1971, I left the project because it came to an end. And I had applied. You got the job at the City Hall. The City Hall well, I didn't take that job, but I had applied for the City Hall, and I took one thing that suited me better, where I worked for 30 years, and that was what is called today WorkSafe.
Oh, okay.
So I made a living, and after I made a living, I worked for fun, and that's almost 20 years now for the for the tourist in tourism. So I was just chuckling when you mentioned all these things. I've been around, but we never stepped on each other's feet. That's just a funny part of it. Anyway, that was my comment.
Nice. That's fun.
All right. Anyone else have a question for John?
I just wanted to say hello, John. It's great to see you and hear you once again. Just so insightful to have the interview of your background and just hear what's going on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, and I just wanted to encourage all the members as well to really check out Heritage Vancouver, because they're so closely aligned with what we do.
Yep.
And nice to see you. And thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
And John, I'm still looking for one or two upcoming guests. We have someone for next week, but I've often thought for many years, the Tour Guide Association should try to have one of the Vancouver City planners come and speak to us, or a retired planner. On that note, remind me of the lady that used to be in charge of Stanley Park. Is it Terry Clark?
Yes.
Years ago?
Yeah, Terry.
I often wanted to have her as a guest while she was still with the park board, but you don't have any connection to her, a way of contacting her, do you?
I might have an email address that still works. I can certainly dig into, I'll make a note and I will dig in and see if I can find it. She would be fun. The other person that might be fun too would be former planner, but still very active in the walking and biking world, would be Sandy James, which I can put you in touch with, because she's got a focus on making the city livable, walkable, and that sort of stuff. And
I personally like the idea of what they're planning for the Granville Bridge, and I know there's always opposition to these types of things, especially Bruce Allen, but yeah, that bridge could use a makeover for sure. And you know, it doesn't need 8 lanes. It never did, because I know it was originally part of a big plan, but that plan never happened. So you know, if it went down to 3 lanes each way, that would be fine. But any comments on the Granville Bridge makeover they're planning?
Oh, I want to see the makeover because it's the one bridge I very rarely cross over. I'm one of those rare people that never learned how to drive. So.
Oh, that's why you don't have okay.
No, I've never possessed a driver's license. I've once been behind the wheel of a car. My dad attempting to get me to be interested, and it's like, why don't you, back the car up a bit? And I'm like, no, thank you. So I walk and I ride my bike, and I take transit. And the Granville Bridge is the one thing that I generally don't enjoy walking over, and bike riding on that thing is just a suicide mission. So having that whole greenway, I think, brought into that to improve it and to make it into something useful. Because the weird thing about the bridge, of course, is it's so honking big, because when they designed it so that the largest coastal freighter of the day could get under it. Mm-hmm. And it was because they still saw in 1952, 53, False Creek as an industrial waterway. Yeah. Well, the bridge opens in 54, and then just a couple of years later, the first of the sawmills burned down. And so that transformation began of the creek, and the need to have large vessels go under the bridge wasn't there. And so it's always been a bit of an oddball entity, and not the most pleasant thing to walk over, let alone try and ride a bike over. And so, no, I think the transformation of it would be really cool, especially if they would actually put the elevators to get you down to Granville Island and, and down. Well, the Vancouver House and the new pavilions that are popping up on the north end.
Yeah.
There are walkways that you'll be able to get off the bridge and walk over the roof garden and then down to Pacific Boulevard and stuff like that. So, you know, they're softening up the bridge a bit, and I think the future bodes well for it.
Did the COVID interruption, wasn't the Vancouver House building the actual tall tower itself? Wasn't it supposed to have an official opening with the Danish architect showing up, but that hasn't happened because of COVID, or do you know anything more about that?
I think it has delayed everything. Plus, they're still working on the ground plane, you know, because they've got some of the retail open, but the school that's taken over one of the triangular buildings is still building out. And they're still touching up the ground plane and various other things. So there's a bunch of improvements and stuff. And I think buildings like that, you know, you can open them whenever. So, yeah, I think it'll be a celebration at some point, probably.
Yeah, maybe fireworks going off the top. Well, okay, this was fabulous, and it's, you know, it's now 12:40 almost, so this has been one of the longest Zoom meetings we've had. So I hope a lot of people didn't mind. We've only lost 2 or 3 members since we started. We had almost 30. So thank you, John, so much for your time. And yes, if you could send an email or see if you can find Terry Clark, former planner Sandy James. Yep. Bob Sung just made a suggestion. One of our members made a suggestion. You probably know Bob anyway. Let me just back up here.
Yeah, Bob and I need to have noodles at Fat Mao when they're open for table service.
Bob, your suggestion just disappeared from my screen here. Yeah, if you're still there, Bob Sung, what was the name of the person you recommended?
Nathan Edelson.
Oh, Nathan Edelson.
Nathan, okay.
Nathan is lovely, and he was a downtown east side planner for years. I've got his. And have you guys had Tom Carter speak to you at all?
No, who's he?
Tom is a historian and painter. He was involved in the music business for a long time. He does large scale historic paintings of Vancouver. But he's also an entertainment historian, and he's on the board of the Entertainment Hall of Fame.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Tom also sits with us on the Friends of the Archives board. So I can forward you his.
Sure. What was his last name again?
Carter. Tom Carter.
Tom Carter. Okay.
Yeah. His now he'd be quite interesting and could take you through a whole other side of Vancouver in terms of theaters and entertainment and history and things like that.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me just type something here. All right. Well, John, thanks again. We'll certainly have you back. There's so many more interesting things. By the way, when we're allowed to reassemble, folks, I know I could shoot a couple of videos. I used to do this short little walking tour just for friends. Never really published it for tourists, but you know, you start out around the Vancouver block there, Granville in Georgia, and move down to the Burke's Clock and move over to the Marine Building, and just coming up Burrard Street to Georgia, a nice little square, you know, area of interesting things and stories to tell people. So sometime in the future, we can look at doing that as you know, as for the members. I guess when we're allowed to assemble with more than 5 people or something. But anyway, all right. Thanks so much, and I'll look for your emails for those other folks, and we'll go from there.
All right. Excellent.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
No, and thank you. This was great fun. So. Bye-bye.
Okay, meet you again, John.
Yes, we'll step on each other's toes somewhere.
Yeah,
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John.
Okay. See you,
All right.
everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
all right. Anyone have any comments or questions or topics they'd like to bring up before we close this all down completely? Next week, we do have another guest speaker lined up, Colin Preston, from retired CBC archivist, and we'll see what magic we can come up with perhaps some. He has a suggestion of a website we'll send out to you for you to look at some old video of Vancouver. But any comments or questions?
I got a situation. I left Vancouver on the 13th of March for Seattle, and I flew to Mexico, and then I couldn't come back because of the closing the borders. So I came back nonstop, but my car is still in Seattle. Is that an essential thing? I don't know who to ask to go across the border.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Maybe go to the border and see if they'll let you through. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you should probably just sell it to pay for the parking after all.
Yeah, really.
No, I had it towed to a friend's place, so at least.
Okay.
Oh, then never mind. Just leave it, Patrick.
I'm gonna leave it.
Yeah.
Does your friend have the key so he can start the engine every week?
Well, yeah, I have one hidden in the light there. You have to get in the car, but it has one of those combinations, so that worked out fine.
The mail's still getting through, so why don't you just mail yourself down?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just checking if there was a place that you actually could ask some, like your MP or maybe a direct line to Trudeau.
Oh, well, I can give you the phone number of the American border people at Blaine there, pardon me, and then you could ask them if I came to the border with a friend who was going to drive me down to Seattle for the purpose of coming right back into Canada, you know, they'll answer that question for you.
I think your only way to get that done is to have somebody you know that's actually able to cross now as an essential service, or get in with a trucker.
Yeah.
That's
Get a
it.
truck.
Yeah, but even then, I think you're only going to get your vehicle to the border and get it to the lot at the border.
Yeah, no problem. It's fine. Yeah. I'll do exactly.
They're not letting the guys from the citizens at Point Bob's run around, so they're not going to let you go down for your car.
I bet they're regretting having voted to stay in the United States now.
Well, you got to do a 14-day.
I didn't think they got much
once you get back,
choice.
even for 4 hours. Yeah. Yeah.
I do have one quick thing here, Jeff. Some of you I've talked to just individually in that I have put together edited an industry form letter that has been put out for everyone to send to their local MP, and added in a little bit extra in terms of the extension of the CURB program. Currently, it only allows for 16 weeks. They did extend the eligibility time up until September, but as there is no cruise ships until Halloween, until we hear otherwise, the border is closed until the 21st, but most likely it's going to be extended even further because things are still out of control in the U.S. Our industry at least is one of those ones that could very well do with an extension of the CURB program. So if anyone would like a copy of that, I'll try and get it available through Gary and his email to everyone to update. And if you want to send that off to your local MP, that would probably be a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Thanks.
Yeah. And Matthew, I had a question about some of those coach video things that we were talking a few weeks ago about. Is that yet available for the CTGA members to go to the YouTube channel and see?
Anybody can go on it on YouTube and see it there. It's all available. Yeah.
All right. I made a few more videos the other day, a couple days ago, and I also showed people how to start the engine of the bus in case there was a scenario where the driver is with you inside a restaurant or something, and then suddenly he needs to deal with something, but says, here's the key, go unlock the door, go start the bus, get the air conditioning on. I did a couple more quick things. I'll send them to you, or figure out how to get it on YouTube.
So that's an excellent segue into my next little bit there, Jeff. I'm hoping to have people start sending and submitting photos from their trips, videos of, wildlife, things that you guys have seen and experienced on your tours anywhere in the last, few years, BC, Alberta, Washington State, but just, we're going to start. Yeah, well, anything like that.
I've
Anything.
been riding my bike around Stanley Park. I got GoPro.
I'm perfectly fine with that. If you want to do a little drive around Stanley Park, I know Marlene was cycling yesterday through, if we want to highlight some mountain biking trails and that sort of stuff, anything. I mean, it's what we do. It's we guide anything like that. So.
I heard that they were going to extend the serve, like you were saying, but I think we all should send a letter because obviously the tourism business is going to be dead for most of the year.
Yeah, hey, so that the Canadian emergency wage subsidy has been extended for sure. The eligibility for the CURB program has been extended until September, so you don't have to have applied in March or April, for example. But the length of time that you can receive benefits is still capped at 16 weeks. 16 weeks for most people is going to be running out in July. And July is a really long way from April of next year.
I think we should all sign the letter and send it for sure.
We will make sure everyone gets a copy of it. You just, fill it out, email it off. I emailed my MP, Harjit Sajan, this morning. So, yeah, voices from the industry are what is needed, because while a lot of businesses can open up, the tourism industry cannot open up. It just doesn't have that capability. Places like West Coast Sightseeing, for example, are, sure, they can apply for the wage subsidy, where 75% of the wage is paid for by the government and 25% by the employer, but they can only bring so many people back to sit in empty buses, right? So, we don't have that ability, unlike, a restaurant worker or something like that, where, people are ordering in and out. We just don't have anybody traveling. So it's like a dead stop. And the amount of people that are out of work in this particular industry is so large that it's not like we can just transition, say a hotel housekeeper, for example, can more relatively easily transition into like cleaning at a care home, for example, which is one of the programs that has been, tried to put in place. We just don't have that ability.
And we don't have.
There's only so many of those jobs available. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get it out. Please share it with as many industry people as you can. I know Canada's gonna, it's gonna be something we have to pay off in the long run, sort of stuff. But so is, keeping a massive recession right now going to have a negative effect. So and that's not going to help us pay our bills at the moment. So.
Matt, just a quick question.
Yes.
And this also addresses Jeff. Thank you for changing the name of your FYI. The reason was so that when people search CTGA of BC, it comes up. So that's good. And in Gary's message, are you already, you and Jackie, Matt, are you starting to accept the members for the members only page?
Oh yeah, there's already a dozen or so people that are in that
Perfect.
one. And as we start building it out, as we had said, like that's verified members only that are in that group, and that's our internal discussion area for those of us that are on Facebook. Whereas the page, and we'll still put out industry things and words like that, is more of our attempts at getting our brand out to the general public, and hopefully, increasing our membership and increasing our awareness, the public's awareness of the group and its membership. So internals on the group, external on the page.
Perfect.
Yeah, because
so anybody that's got any pictures, videos, Jeff and I are going to keep working on uploading different things for like the FYI and that sort of thing. But just your own experience. If you've got a funny story that you'd like to be able to share, and just take a video and of you documenting to us. If you've just got great photos, just send them along. I will provide the link for you guys to be able to submit them. We want to start building up some of this content. We want people to see what it is that you're showcasing the world, showcasing BC, to the world as.
I have two questions. So all of those bus still pictures I sent and the coach videos, I really only wanted that for members of the association. So that's where that'll eventually end up?
Well, for right now, it was still on the page. It's going to take more because we didn't have a group at that time. So it was the only way to be able to get people to do it. But the problem is right now, until more people are in on the group, there's only a dozen people that can see that. So we're trying, we want more people to be a part of the group and part of the discussion on there as well as Instagram and all these other ones as well. But we'll provide a link for you to connect, send us the information, and then we'll start going through it before we post it.
I've been trying only to send out one message a month, and perhaps on the July 1st message, I'll make it really clear to, maybe it'll be just strictly about Facebook and encouraging people to join the group page. So in addition to what Gary does, to really focus, and I'll do a longer blurb on that part.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right now, the internal one, it's just our discussion. It's basically like this. What we really want is the public to see us. We want the public to go, that's pretty cool. Like that picture that you've got in behind you right there of Pyramid Lake. I'd been up to Jasper Pyramid Mountain. I'd been up there a number of times. It was only 4 years ago that I first made my trip over to that island and went, oh, this is a pretty good spot to be able to showcase. That's very different than just Jasper Town Site or Marlene Lake, that sort of thing. So,
yeah. And I've got my pictures of Chilliwack's signs all along here. It's hysterical. It's a picture, a cartoon of a little fairy that says, "There is no poop fairy." And it's just delightful.
But those are the sorts of things that are great. We can use to highlight BC as it is right now with the current situation. It's topical, but just anything like that. We've all got bad, funny, crazy, wonderful stories, and hopefully some of us have photos to go along with that. So any suggestions you guys have to help us out, we want to build up content. It's a long-term process. But anything like that, we'll get it together for you guys to help, send that off. I know I've got tens of thousands of photos, but I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about us. So, anything you guys are willing to share would be wonderful.
Just explain to people, because I had trouble fully understanding it for some strange reason, even though I've got a Facebook page. We've created, is this CTGA page on Facebook? Is this a new page, or we've revamped the other page?
The page has been there for a couple of years. It was Rania that had first created it, just to have the name and that. And as we're starting to kind of consolidate the brand and make sure that all of the same thing is available on different social media.
Right. So
this is a focus point of building a voice to the public. It's like a billboard, basically, is what the page is like.
But there's two sides to it. There's the public side that anyone in the public can see it, and then there's our side, the group.
No. The page and a group are completely different. You have the page, which is the public's looking at, and a group is our discussion point, our ability to share ideas,
pictures,
just within us. Exactly, just within us and that sort of stuff. So they have two different ways to. You still look. You're still going to look. You're going to look on Facebook for CTGA, and I'll share the link. But they have two different reasons, raison d'être, reasons to be, right? So one is to get the word out to the public. One is for us to continue to provide another forum for us to provide dialogue amongst each other.
So Rania had originally started what we now are calling page, and that's the public. So that was the one that Rania started. And now Matt and Jackie are going to administer the group page, which is going to be internal, where people will need to apply, just very much like your FYI.
Yeah. The FYI was set up. It doesn't really even need to be there anymore if we're going to have this. I would prefer to just have the one Facebook thingy that has the two sides, something the public can see and then only members can see in the group side. Those coach safety videos aren't aimed at the public. That's aimed at tour guides understanding what to do in an emergency if one comes up, how to open the window, how to open the door, how to open the engine hood, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But then I guess this is more of a discussion between you and the board or me. Did you not want to keep your FYI because you give updates on, updates on your thing? Is that not your thing? because I really think your FYI is really valuable, and it's always been associated with CTGA, even on the website, having your Jeff's FYI, so that, you know, that still becomes your baby, whereas the group page is a board thing.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. Yes. Well, I at the moment, I don't have any plans to shut down my Jeff's FYI. So what we need for those people who are on Facebook is they should be a part of this new CTGA or the one that Rania started Facebook thing, and they should still have a connection to my Jeff's FYI so that they're getting, it's kind of like having two newspapers. One occasionally publishes and tells you stuff you need to know, and the other does the same thing. It's not like the board and Matt or anyone is going to be publishing something every day, but no. the members want to know where to go if they want additional information. And that idea that you guys have, whether it's you, Marlene, or Matthew, about the Google thingamajiggy, you know, written documents where
Google, Jeff,
yeah.
Google is a completely separate thing from social media. That's an administrative thing that's completely separate.
But isn't
social
I
media?
That was
No, Jeff, everything on the Google side is an administrative thing that is completely separate from everything right now. Everything that we're talking about is the social media side and trying to create our view to the public or the public's view of us.
Yeah. And so that's why having you change your name, your FYI, it just does, it makes it easier to search so people can belong to both yours and the official board one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I?
Growing pains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Matt, you know, your YouTube channel is called Media CTGA.
Yes, that's another thing that we're having to work out. Yeah, but I've noticed that too.
Just to make it easier to find. With the
Yeah, no, I've noticed that. There's a few other things that are on the administrative side that are taking they're not as easy to fix right now, but it's on my to-do lists.
Yeah, I find it's very confusing. Sometimes getting 4 or 5 tour-related invitations from Facebook. That's why I think it's important to concentrate on Jeff's sites and maybe just 2 of CTGA. Yeah. The main one Matthew said and the one for internal. Otherwise, I get always these Facebook gling, and I thought, okay, another one. So which ones belongs to? So you could just really concentrate on this.
Yeah. So Renzo, if you want to help, if you want a hand, I can easily help you turn off some of those notifications, because it's really useful if the members like the page, because what it does is as you build up more people liking it, it rises us up in the ranks. You can also mute those particular notifications so you only see the ones that you want to get, i.e. the ones that are delivered just within the group, for example.
Yeah.
So, that's one way of going.
It's only because some other groups I belong to is getting all this, it's getting almost too much. I almost think I'm going to want to get away from Facebook.
Yeah.
I think all the time.
Matt's suggestion of getting rid of those notifications is a good thing. So definitely, yeah.
The one thing that about Facebook. Well,
you cannot get away. I know that because of my personal side too, right?
It has. Well, I mean, you've got 2 billion people that are checking Facebook at least once every week. So there is a massive free worldwide audience for that. Now, we're never going to get 2 billion people. I'm not deluded on that sort of stuff, but it is such a valuable tool that, as time goes on and we're hoping to be able to concentrate things so that you're not getting inundated with all these aspects of, what you're connected to and not. And some of it is simply just a matter of following or liking a page or joining a group, but making sure you can mute the notifications from it and check it when you want to, rather when they send it to you.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm more than willing to, if you want to chat sometime, feel free. I can help you out with that. So
thanks, Matthew.
No problem. Anyone else?
Hi to everyone.
Let's see recording.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for the discussion here now afterwards too.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Good day. See you next week.
Excellent meeting. It was awesome.
It was. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jeff.
It was really
So Matt, you're gonna send the letter for everyone
I'm going to connect with Gary, and he'll send out his little summary email afterwards and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to make sure that there is a link to the group and page, and I'll probably add in a couple of other little things as well. Just now that I see the notifications, mute notifications is an issue. I can send in something about that as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Here, Jeff, if you want to stick around for a second, I just want to chat with you 1 second.
Bye-bye.
See you later. And bye, Marion. There we go. Okay, and stop recording.